This movie is a feature adaptation of Frank Herbert's science fiction novel. It tells a story about the son of a noble family who is entrusted with the protection of the most valuable asset and most vital element in the galaxy. First of all, the trouble begins in this movie just about immediately. In the opening credits, we see the title of the film and then an ominous Part 1. So what we're seeing is not a complete story. It's just the kick-off to a new franchise of 2 or more movies. It's a rather presumptuous promise embedded in those words, that after 2 hours and 35 minutes, we'll be so hooked by this saga that we'll be hungry for Part 2. This movie ends up feeling like an extended prologue for what one can only hope will be a sequel that will clarify its parables and paradoxes and really delve into the minds of its characters. The movie doesn't shape the novel's intricate world building into satisfyingly digestible form. It's an act of world building that runs out of storytelling steam. Great sci-fi fantasy film requires fantastic world building, but not more essential than the storytelling. The history and complex social structure that are integral to the novel's vision are condensed into a blur, cramping the mythology. The layers of political, religious, ecological, and technological allegory that give the novel high praise get pushed behind in the screenplay into an uninvolving trade war. It's rich with themes and visual motifs, but it turns into a movie about the sun piloting through sandstorms and hooking up with the rebels of the desert, who in this movie are a lot more noble than interesting. It's not just that the story loses its pulse, it loses any sense that we're emotionally invested in it. Part hero's journey and part survival story, the film keeps throwing arcane details at you, which might thrill the source novel geeks, but will have most everyone else zoning out. The storytelling lacks the clean lines to make it consistently propulsive. Paradoxically, given its lofty position in the sci-fi canon, much of the narrative's novelty has also been diluted. The movie does a lot of cagey work on the level of parable, and it all comes at the cost of character. The chosen one mythology is far from compelling, laid out confusingly to mask the simplicity at its core. Visions and murmured warnings and oracular epiphanies abound, all working to convince us that the hero of the film is, in fact, the hero. It all feels like a fait accompli that the noble prince standing before us is destined to be the thing everyone is so worked up about. From the sun making his way to Arrakis to scenes of him on spice harvesting duty, we're constantly being reminded that he may be the one. But unlike, say, Neo in The Matrix, we never really get to see the transformation that makes the Messiah. Apart from Rebecca Ferguson, who managed to holding firm against the movie's stylistic onslaught and making an impression, other talented actors drift in and out of the picture. No one has much time to distinguish themselves, all functioning as mere flashy cogs in the movie's churning machine. We don't really learn much about individual characters in the film, making it hard to grasp or care about the stakes of the story. In all its marvel, this movie forgets to do basic things, like give us someone or something to root for. It's all just a bunch of pretty shots and lavish customary with no guiding spirit. Overall, this movie is ultimately a long and overwrought prologue, a prelude to action rather than its own autonomous story. It's a 2 hours and 35 minutes of dull political maneuvering and meaningless effects-laden warfare that feels like a laborious setup for a hopefully more gripping film to come. One thing for sure, this story needs a huge payoff in the next film to compensate for this movie. We highly doubt it will be the case.